Joining us now for reaction from Boston is Jeff Beatty, a retired Delta Force officer who also worked as a counter-terror official at the CIA. In Idaho, former CIA operative Mike Baker's with us. And with me here in Washington is Rosa Brooks, a former Obama Defense Department official and current senior fellow at the New America Foundation. It's great to see all of you. Mike, I believe you trained with Gina, correct? So you can give us a little insight into her and her experience. We demonstrated how duplicitous the Democrats are, and they supported Brennan, and now suddenly Gina Haspel is a problem. But Gina Haspel, her work ethic, her experience, who she is as a person, you know this well.
Yeah, we were in training at the same time. At the beginning, which seems like a long time ago, of our respective careers, she obviously has excelled where, you could argue mine was somewhat mediocre. But look, I think what you should be doing is taking this monologue, the angle, and just putting it on a continuous loop, because it's absolutely correct. The idea that somehow they're able to now draw a sharp divide between the confirmation process for John Brennan, who I do have a lot of respect for, a very well-experienced officer, but unless they have some different standard for a male director designate and a female director designate, and I can't imagine they do, then how do you possibly explain this other than, as you pointed out, the difference is Trump? And I found most interesting of the open questions that were asked yesterday in the open session of the hearings were these questions about how did you feel about it? What did you think about it? Well, look, what really counts when you're talking about the intel community and the military and law enforcement is what are the laws on the books at that time, right? How somebody feels about it, frankly, I don't care, and I don't think the American public really cares what the feels are. Can you imagine if a combat brigade or your operational people in your intelligence community go out and basically are making their decisions individually based on how they might feel about something?
The values question came up a lot. Rosa, I want to go to you because even people who are very critical of this president, Phil Mudd is a CIA analyst on CNN, and he was asked about Kamala Harris's values question to Gina Haspel. He said, did you think this is moral, what was being done? She stayed on the morality question. This is what he said.
Do you believe that the previous interrogation techniques were immoral?
She spoke about American values and she spoke about rule of law. I appreciate what she votes on. She can vote however she wants. I don't appreciate the collective amnesia.
Collective amnesia, obviously referring, and again, that is a consistent critic of the president, collective amnesia on the part of Democrats who voted enthusiastically for John Brennan.
Laura, I think you are highlighting the fact that hypocrisy and spinelessness are bipartisan vices here. I am disappointed in Gina Haspel. I think she didn't answer a straight question, and she owes us an answer to a straight question. Do you think it's immoral? She dodged that one completely. But you're absolutely right that the Obama administration soft-pedaled this issue. That we're now seeing scrutiny of Gina Haspel. I do think, though, you're wrong about what dilemma it is that Democrats are facing. The irony here is that Democrats like the fact that Gina Haspel is not an ideologue. She's a professional. She's not somebody who's coming in saying, I want to advance the Republican agenda. She's saying, no, I just want to advance the American agenda. Democrats like that about her a whole lot more than they like many of Trump's political appointees. But the downside is that if you want that, you got to embrace somebody who seems to have embraced torture, which Democrats aren't supposed to like.
She didn't design the program, and she said many times that she wasn't going to.
I got to throw the challenge flag.
Jeff, former Delta Force, is coming in on the challenge flag.
I've got to throw the challenge flag there, Rosa. It's torture is a propaganda word. That is a propaganda word, and it's chosen to evoke an emotional response. It's chosen to conjure up images of putting people on the rack or cutting off fingers or limbs.
It's also a legal
let's be accurate.
Term,
let's not be
law,
propaganda.
It's in international law and domestic law.
Well, if you train your people at Georgetown to use propaganda terms, you've got to. I don't allow my students to use loaded language like that. Let's talk about what it is. Specifically, it's not the rack. It's not cutting people's fingers off or limbs off. It is waterboarding. So if you want to talk about waterboarding, let's talk about it. Let's not go from the specific to the general, and the general is generally a lot more heinous than what we're talking about with waterboarding.
But Jeff, I think
Laura,
hold on a second. I think what Rose is saying is there is a convention against torture, right? There's a UN convention against torture. However, we've shifted our understanding of what that means. And after 9/11, we wanted the information. As your former commando experience, we wanted the information to stop these attacks.
Right.
And if anyone,
like
any one of us had a kid who was being kidnapped, and one person knew where our child was, would say, "Do whatever you have to do to get that information." If we would say that as parents, we know that.
Yes, you would. This is the hypocrisy of it, though. It's like having a pet dog, and you train the dog to bring the paper to you, and the dog does what you want it to do, follows your instructions, and now, years later, you beat the dog with the paper. You know, it's like, is it legal? Was it legal? It was, and she did legal procedure, and it was investigated twice and found to be legal.
She's eminently qualified to be CIA director by any fair indication or examination of her background. What she feels as a person is frankly not relevant to her job as a person in charge of the Thailand black site. What her feelings? What does that mean? Your feelings? That's such a Democrat.
I agree with that.
Lib way. What is your feelings? Go ahead. Rosa has to get back in. Then Mike. Mike, hold on. Rosa first, then Mike.
This is not my propaganda word. After so there's a real irony here. It's funny to me how we always talk about the World War II generation as the greatest generation. So after World War II, when we faced an absolutely existential threat, we prosecuted in the Tokyo tribunals. We prosecuted Japanese soldiers for waterboarding U.S. soldiers, and we called it torture. Then the same we have called it torture consistently. That's what the law calls it. It's not what I call it. There was a brief period in the Bush administration when some of Dick Cheney's tame lawyers decided they didn't want to call it torture because they wanted to be able to do it. That was then repudiated just a few years later, even by the Bush administration.
Cheney still says we should be doing waterboarding. Isn't Cheney up there tonight?
Let's be really clear. This is not.
Yeah, but to call it torture now,
I can't believe
that's not the term that was applicable at the time that this happened.
Okay, guys, you got to speak at one time. Let me get to Mike first, and then we'll go back to Jeff.
I thank you, Laura. I can't believe that we're going through this and relitigating again with somebody who's as eminently qualified for this position as Gina Haspel is. But look, what they did so well all those years ago, this was front burner topic, was the far left. They seized the moral high ground and said everything except talking to a detainee is torture. Everything. Now, I understand obviously it's an emotive subject, but frankly, that's not the case. There are areas, it's like everything else. It's not this or that. There are areas, and they obviously refer to as enhanced interrogation techniques, that existed. And may I remind you, there was Department of Justice, Office of Legal Counsel, weighed in on this repeatedly and clearly and unambiguously. And that information passed to the General Counsel of the agency. That was disseminated to the field. And if I could just point one other thing out, there is a worn path. There is a well-worn path between Langley, where the CIA headquarters is, and Capitol Hill back in 2002, 2003, of briefers going up and talking to the Gang of Eight and others, explaining this program.
Yeah, I made that point in the Angle. They were briefed. Nancy Pelosi learned about it at the same time Gina did. Jeff.
I just think it's important here to recognize another aspect of what you brought out in the Angle, talking about that this is more about Donald J. Trump than it is about Gina Haspel. And even to the Republicans involved in this, salute to Senator McCain. He actually encouraged me back in the day to run for Senate, which I did. Maybe I should be mad at him for that because I got my clock cleaned here in Mass against John Kerry. But, I have the highest respect for him and everything that he went through. But I think that he's letting his animus against President Trump bleed over into this. I mean, he has a strong dislike for the president, and when he says, "Don't come to my funeral," that's a strong dislike. And I'm afraid that he's so respected that out of respect to him, that other Republican senators may accede to his wish that this nominee of President Trump not get confirmed. And I think it's a mistake, and I hope that he will change his mind about it, and I hope that his colleagues will recognize she's professional. It's like if you've got a great group of people, you want somebody who knows how to best use them. Nobody knows better than she how to get the best out of the agency, and we heard today she's going to respect the law.
Guys, we could have an hour conversation about this and so many other intel topics. Would love to have you all back. This is a fantastic conversation.